Imagine for a moment that you're holding a blueprint. But this isn't just a sketch on a napkin or some rough idea.
No, it's a geometric, crystalline vision of absolute perfection.
Exactly.
No.
It exists entirely inside your mind. And in this mental space, every single line is straight.
Every angle is true.
Right. The structure is flawless. It is this cathedral of light. But then you have to actually pick up a tool.
You have to build it.
You have to build it in the real world. And the real world is, well, it's messy. The wood has knots in it.
The clay has grit.
The material resists you. And this friction, this agonizing gap between the perfect vision and the resistant reality is the absolute ecstasy and the torture of the star sign we are taking a deep dive into today. Chitra Nakshatra. It is the artisan's mind.
It creates a really fascinating tension, doesn't it? We often mistake Chitra for simply being about pretty things because the astrological literature always links it to jewelry and bright colors and pearls.
Right, the surface level stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if we actually dig into the texts, the core struggle is much deeper and frankly much more painful. It's what we might call emotional perfectionism.
Emotional perfectionism, that sounds exhausting.
Oh, it is exhausting. It's that agonizing gap you just described. It's not just about aesthetics. It is about the building drive.
This is the domain of Vishvakarma, right?
Yes, the celestial architect in Vedic mythology. The karmic lesson here isn't just to build things to look nice. The lesson is to see beyond the surface shine.
What we call Maya, or illusion.
Precisely, to find the inner crystal core of truth. They're trying to force the material world to match the divine blueprint in their head. And the world rarely cooperates.
So come sit here. Let's really look at this blueprint together. Because to understand why this struggle is so intense, you have to look at where Chitra actually sits in the sky.
It isn't just floating in a void.
No, it's holding a very heavy structural load for the entire zodiac.
If you look at the wheel of the zodiac, Chitra occupies the exact gravitational center. It spans from 23 degrees, 20 minutes of Virgo, to 6 degrees, 40 minutes of Libra.
The 180-degree midpoint.
Yes, it is the bridge between two completely different psychological worlds.
So it's straddling a border, a very distinct border.
A very fortified border, yes. You have the first half in Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. This is the hall of logic, data analysis, the dusty workshop.
It's solitary.
It's the place where you measure twice and cut once. Then you cross the bridge into the first degrees of Libra, which is ruled by Venus.
And that represents the art gallery, right? The marketplace.
The marketplace, negotiation, and aesthetic harmony.
So if we unpack this for the listener, the Chitra native is essentially trying to walk a tightrope between the dusty, noisy sweat equity workshop of Virgo and the elegant champagne-sipping cocktail party of Libra.
That is the perfect image. And that tightrope walk is relentless. They have to be the laborer and the diplomat simultaneously.
I want to get granular here, because usually in these deep dives we talk about the sign as a whole. But with Chitra, the sources suggest that the specific flavor of the struggle changes drastically depending on which part of the star you're in. These are the padas.
Correct. Pada literally means foot or step. Every nakshatra is divided into 4 steps. It tells the story of the artisan's journey, step by step. It shows the evolution of consciousness within the sign.
Walk us through that journey. Where does the artisan start?
We start in Virgo. Pada 1 is the crafting phase. This is the architect obsessed with his tools. It falls in the Leo Navamsa. And just to clarify for everyone, the Navamsa is like a microscopic zoom in on the soul's motivation.
And because it's Leo, it's fiery.
Fiery and individualistic, but it's still in Virgo. So they aren't thinking about how the audience will react yet. They are thinking about structural integrity. Is this beam strong enough? Is this calculation correct? It's deeply analytical and self-contained.
Okay, so that's the engineer or the solitary craftsman. Then we step into Pada 2. And looking at the charts, this seems to be a critical point.
It is. This is the Vagottama position.
We see that word a lot in the texts, Vagottama. For the non-astrologers listening, what does that actually mean for their daily life? Is it intense?
Very intense. Think of it as a double dose of energy. It means the planet is in Virgo in the main chart and also in Virgo in the subplot chart. It is Virgo within Virgo.
Absolute technical mastery.
Exactly. In our artisan metaphor, this is the moment the engineer uses the flame to forge the jewel. It is the perfection of the tool before it ever meets the world.
So this isn't just someone who is good at their job. This is the person who stays late to polish the back of the drawer that no one will ever see.
Yes, they are capable of immense focus, but it can be incredibly critical. There is no room for error here. If Pada 1 is learning the tool, Pada 2 is becoming the tool.
Which brings us to the border crossing. We leave the workshop of Virgo and enter the gallery of Libra with Pada 3.
The shift moves to the market. The focus moves from the tool to the social impact. The question changes from, is it straight to do? People love it.
It's about relationship and refinement.
How the creation sits in the world. And finally, Pada 4, also in Libra, is the completion of form. It becomes airy, idealistic, almost poetic. They aren't just building a house anymore, they're trying to build a utopia.
So it's a movement from Sadharma, or perfecting oneself in the workshop, to relational unity in the gallery. But I want to challenge this idea of harmony for a second. Because despite all this talk of Venus and beauty, Chitra is ruled by Mars. We have this Virgo Earth and Libra air, but the engine running the whole thing is Martian fire. That feels like a massive contradiction.
It is the defining contradiction. And it's where the magic happens. Think of Chitra like a surgeon's scalpel in the hands of an artist.
A scalpel? That's intense.
It is. Mars provides the cutting edge. It provides the heat, the aggression, the penetrating force. But because of the Virgo and Libra influence, that force isn't used for war, it's used for design.
It cuts to create beauty.
It carves the marble to reveal the statue. He uses the raw force of Mars to forge form within the delicate air of Libra.
That is a powerful image, a scalpel in the hands of an artist. But a scalpel is a dangerous tool. If your hand slips, you do damage. I imagine this intensity comes with a pretty significant shadow side. We talked about emotional perfectionism earlier, but how does that look when it goes wrong in a relationship or at work?
It manifests as a fragile ego. Because the Chitra native identifies so heavily with the form, whether that form is their body, their project, or their reputation, they have a deep sensitivity to critique.
Because if you criticize their work, you aren't just criticizing a task.
Right. In their mind, you're criticizing their soul.
So they oscillate then.
Wildly. They swing between arrogance like, I've created the perfect thing, I am a god, and deep, crippling insecurity if they spot a single flaw.
It's the smug mask, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've read about this in the behavioral analysis of the sign. They project this dignified, polished, almost untouchable fronts.
But it's a shield. They are protecting the soft underbelly. They are panicking about a crack in the foundation that only they can see. They wear the mask of perfection to keep people from getting close enough to see the messy workshop inside.
There is also a somewhat humorous, almost tragic aspect to their impulsiveness. Bipin Bahari, the great astrologer, had a very dry observation about Chitra's speech patterns. He noted that they have a tendency to give a reply without forethought and then, I love this phrasing, wake up at the 11th hour trying to rectify their utterances when it is too late.
It is the curse of the quick mind. Mars acts. Mercury analyzes. In Chitra, Mars often speaks before Mercury can hit the brakes.
Westion, we've all been there. That moment of instant regret where the words are out and you see the damage and you're frantically trying to backpedal. But for Chitra, because of that Mars energy, it probably comes out sharper than intended.
It happens to the best of us, but for Chitra, it's a chronic condition. But there is another layer to their identity that is equally complex, especially in the modern context. Chitra is technically classified in the ancient texts as a female nakshatra, yet it is ruled by the hypermasculine Mars.
This brings up the concept of fluid polarity.
It does. It creates a vessel that holds both Shiva, the masculine structural drive, and Shakti, the feminine creative power.
How does that actually show up in a person?
This often manifests as a capacity to transcend binary norms. You meet Chitra men who are incredibly graceful, obsessed with aesthetics and grooming. You meet Chitra women who possess a steely, aggressive resolve and a builder's mentality.
In modern terms, we might call this identity fluidity.
Exactly. They balance the aggressive drive to build with the receptive desire to beautify. They see beauty beyond standard forms because they embody that duality themselves. They are comfortable with the in-between. They understand that you need both the hammer and the velvet.
So let's ground this. We have this scalpel and artist energy, this fluid identity, and this intense drive for structural perfection. Where does this go in the real world? If you are sitting across from a Chitra native at a dinner party, what do they actually do for a living?
Well, we don't just look for artists. That's too simple. We look for professions that require structural aesthetics. It's not just about painting a canvas. It's about necessity and structure. The most literal translation of the Martian scalpel and Venusian beauty is the plastic surgeon.
That makes perfect sense. Literally cutting the body to create an aesthetic ideal.
Modifying the form to match the inner blueprint, yes. But it also applies to architects. Remember, the deity is Vishvakarma, the builder of the gods' palaces. Architects don't just decorate. They have to understand physics, load-bearing walls and materials,
That's the Virgo and Mars part.
and they also have to make it stunning, which is the Libra and Venus part.
Fashion designers fit this too.
Perfectly. Think about it. It's cutting fabric. It involves scissors, needles, measuring very precise, sharp work. But the result is glamour. It's the workshop meeting the runway.
I've seen therapists on the list as well. That stopped me for a second. That seems different from architecture or surgery.
Is it, though? Think about what a good therapist does. They are performing spiritual craftsmanship. They are looking at the internal architecture of the human mind. They are finding the structural flaws, the trauma, the false beliefs, and helping the client reconstruct their identity.
It is surgery on the psyche.
Yes, they are rebuilding the self.
That connects back to the idea of the inner crystal core you mentioned at the start. They are trying to fix the internal structure so the external reality holds up. But speaking of the self holding up, when this balance is off, when the perfectionism gets too high and the Mars energy burns too hot, the body usually keeps the score.
It does. For Chitra, mental health drives physical wellness more than almost any other nakshatra. You cannot separate the two. That fear of rejection and the pressure of emotional perfectionism manifests somatically.
And things can get a little bit shaky in the physical body. What are the warning signs? If I'm a Chitra native, what is my body trying to tell me?
One of the most specific warnings in the texts is vertigo. In German, we use the word Schwindel for dizziness. It represents a partial loss of consciousness or balance.
That is fascinatingly literal.
It makes sense symbolically. If you are constantly trying to balance on that high wire between the practicality of Virgo and the idealism of Libra, eventually you get dizzy. Your equilibrium fails. The world spins because you are spinning between two realities.
Vertigo. It's like the physical manifestation of their psychological juggling act.
Precisely. We also see significant abdominal and digestive issues. Ulcers are very common. Remember, Chitra is a pitta, or fiery nakshatra, ruled by Mars. That internal heat that Agni has to go somewhere.
If it isn't channeled into creativity, it turns inward.
It burns the stomach lining. It creates what the texts call vrana yoga, which is a tendency toward boils or ulcers.
And I assume the Libra influence brings in the kidneys.
Yes, the kidneys and bladder are ruled by Libra and Venus. These filter the body's fluids. When the emotions, which are water, become toxic or overwhelmed, the kidneys suffer, and of course skin allergies.
Why the skin?
The skin is the boundary between the self and the world. For a nakshatra so obsessed with surface shine appearance and how they interact with the environment, the skin becomes the canvas where their stress appears. Hives, rashes, sensitivity to sunlight. It's the body's way of saying, I am irritated with the environment.
So if you are a Chitra native or you know one and you see these symptoms, the ulcers, the dizziness, the skin flaring up, it's a sign that the Agni, the fire is out of control. How do we stabilize it? We can't just tell them to stop being a perfectionist. That's like telling water not to be wet.
No, you cannot extinguish the fire because that kills their creativity. If you take away their drive, they become depressed. You have to direct and cool the fuel. The ancient texts are very specific here. They recommend the worship of goddess Durga.
And specifically on Fridays, correct?
Yes, this is a very precise prescription, and the logic is beautiful. Friday is the day of Venus. It's associated with love, softness, and art. Durga, however, is the fierce warrior form of the feminine. She rides a tiger. She carries weapons.
So you are mixing the energies.
You are doing exactly what Chitra needs to do. By worshiping a warrior goddess on the day of love, you are integrating the two poles. You are using the Venusian day to soften the Martian aggression, but you are using the Martian deity Durga to give structure and spine to the Venusian energy. It prevents creative burnout.
That is incredibly logical. It's like an astrological prescription drug. For those listening who might want something tangible to where the texts mention gemstones.
Opal or pearl.
Why those specifically? I would have thought something red for Mars, like coral.
No, coral would increase the heat. We want to cool it. The symbol of Chitra is the pearl. Think about how a pearl is made. It starts as an irritation, a piece of grit inside the oyster. The oyster coats it layer by layer in beauty until it becomes a jewel.
That is the Chitra life path in a nutshell.
It is. Wearing a pearl or opal helps ground that restlessness. It soothes the inner critic and helps them accept that the grit is necessary to make the jewel.
And for those who are into deities or gemstones, there's a more practical remedy you mentioned in the notes, art therapy.
Creative therapy is perhaps the most powerful modern remedy. And I don't mean just doodling to relax. I mean mindful design, the act of externalizing the inner duality. When a Chitra native takes that perfect agonizing blueprint in their head and forces it onto paper or into clay, they are exercising the tension.
It turns the conflict into art. That is really Leewand. It takes the poison and turns it into medicine.
Exactly. It fulfills the building drive of Vishwakarma without the high stakes of personal identity. If the clay pot cracks, you aren't a failure. You just make another pot.
It teaches the lesson of the flawed material world in a safe environment.
So we've unpacked this incredible journey. We've moved from the dusty workshop of Virgo, where the tools are sharpened, to the gallery of Libra, where the art is displayed. We've seen the scalpel used to create beauty. We've seen the struggle of the perfectionist trying to build a heaven on earth.
And we've seen that the struggle for perfection is really a struggle for truth. The Chitra native often feels torn between two worlds, the practical and the ideal, the masculine and the feminine. They feel like they have to choose. But that tension isn't a mistake.
No, it is the point. The core spiritual teaching of Chitra is profound. We often think duality is the enemy, something to be resolved or fixed. But Chitra teaches us that duality exists only to reveal unity.
Duality exists only to reveal unity.
The friction between the two poles is what creates the spark. The Chitra native is the bridge between the physical and divine worlds. They are designed to reflect all colors of the cosmic spectrum. Their job isn't to choose one side, but to build the structure that holds them both together.
And in doing so, they don't just build beautiful things, they build an entirely new consciousness.